Okay, 7th graders, today we're talking about inverse variation. And our essential question is, can you recognize when two variables are inversely proportional? So our first question is, what is inverse variation? And it's the exact opposite of direct variation. So it's when y equals k divided by x. You remember that direct variation was when y equals k times x. So inverse variation is when y equals k divided by x. And the graph of an inverse variation generally looks like this curved line. Kind of a half U shape in one quadrant. So our first thing is to identify inverse variations, and so the directions here say to tell whether x and y show direct variation, inverse variation, or neither, and then we have to explain. So for inverse variation we need y equals a number divided by x. For direct variation we need y equals a number times x. Either way, we need each of our answers to say y equals. So here I would divide by 5 to get rid of it. So I have y equals 1/5 times x, and that's going to be direct variation. On the second one, to get rid of 1/3 times y, I have to divide by 1/3. So here I have 1 over x. I don't divide, I multiply, keep, change, flip by 3 over 1. So I get y equals 1 times 3 is 3, x times 1 is x. So y equals a number divided by x is inverse variation. On this next one, I have y equals negative x minus 7. This minus 7, there's nothing in either of my equations that's an add or subtract anything to my number times x or my number divided by x. So anytime I have something added or subtracted, it's neither direct or inverse variation. So those are pretty easy to identify. On the next one, I needed to say y equals, so I have to add 1 to both sides. And I have y equals 2x plus 1. Again, I have something added, so it's neither. Here, I have to divide by 1/5 to get rid of it. And that's 1x, so 1 times keep, change, flip, 1 over 1 times 5 over 1 gives me just 5. So y equals 5x, and that's direct variation. And then the last one, I divide by 2. So I have 1 over x times 1 over 2. Excuse me, y equals 1 divided by 2x. Or I could rewrite this as y equals 0.5 divided by x, so that's inverse. Okay, on the last question, in the graph x and y show inverse variation. Which equation relates x and y? And I forgot to put the graph on, but I will draw it for you. and the graph has a point at 2, 1. And it's going like this. So we can see from the graph that it's definitely an inverse variation. And if the point 2, 1 works, then this is the x value and this is the y value. So I should be able to fill those two numbers into x and y, and they should come out equally. So if I fill in 2 here, negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. Well, that's not 1, so it's not A. And letter B, 2 divided by 2 equals 1, 2 and 1, has to be letter B. We know it's not C and D because those are direct variations. So it had to be either A or B. And when we fill in x here, we get this y value. Okay, let's take a look at some real life applications. Again, a graph that I forgot to attach shows the number of hours y it takes x workers to paint a room. And the equation that they give us is y equals 8 divided by x. How does y change as x increases? Well, our graph at 1 we have 7. At 2 we're at 4. At 3 we're a little below 3. At 4 we're at 2. 7 we're about at 1. So our graph looks like this, and this is workers, and this is hours. So how does y change as x increases? Well, as the number of workers goes up, the number of hours goes down. Does that make sense? The more workers you have, the less time it takes to do something. Of course it does. As the number of workers increases, the time decreases. Do x and y show direct or inverse variation? Well, they gave us the equation, and it's y equals a number divided by x, so it's inverse. And how many hours does it take 5 workers to paint the room? Well, let's look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It takes them less than 2 hours, but it's not quite clear exactly how long. But we can fill in our x value of 5 for the equation. So y equals 8 divided by 5. And if I do that on my calculator, I get 1.6 hours. The next question says, how many hours does it take 3 workers to paint the room? And if I look at my graph, it's hard to tell. It seems like it's in between 2 and 3. So again, I'll just fill it in because x is this value, so I fill in my x. And if I use my calculator here, I get 2 2/3 or 2.7 hours. Suppose y varies inversely with x and y equals 3 when x equals 1. Write an equation that relates x and y. So if we have y equals k divided by x, I can fill in my x and y values, so 3 equals k divided by 1. I filled in 1 for x and 3 for y. Well, 3 equals what divided by 1? Or how can I get rid of this division? I can multiply by 1, and I get 3 equals k. So then I can just write my answer as y equals 3 over x. I just fill in my k value for my equation. Okay. On numbers 1 through 4, tell whether x and y show direct variation, inverse variation, or neither, and explain your reasoning. So we need to make these all say y equals. So here I would divide by 2. And this says y equals 3 over 2x plus 1 over 2. So that's neither because of this plus something. To make this one say y equals, I would multiply by 5 to get rid of it. So I get y equals 30 over x, and that's inverse. I want you to try 3 and 4. And then on number 5, we have to write an equation relating x and y. So if they give us x and y, I can just fill in what I know. So 5 equals k divided by 1. Multiply by 1 to get rid of it. 5 equals k. So here, y equals 5 divided by x. So I want you to try 3, 4, and 6 for homework. We're going to take a look at number 7 for our warm-up tomorrow. Have a great night.